Hey everyone, welcome to another GoDaddy Pro meetup. My name is Marcus Burnett, and today I have a couple of very smart people joining me to talk about their experiences branding businesses and branding themselves along the way. Before I introduce them, though, I do want to let you all know that I will be monitoring the chat throughout, and if you have any questions for our guests, please do leave them in there, and we'll ask them along the way. And this is being recorded, so if you need to hop off early or if you want to share this with your team later, a link will be sent out to the replay once it's available. Without that, first up, we have Michelle Schulp, founder and lead designer at Marktime Media. Michelle has worked with several large companies like Target with their brand recognition and has also grown a strong personal brand, which we'll talk about a bit later. How are you doing today, Michelle?
Oh, pretty good. Can't complain.
That's awesome. Where are you coming to us from?
Minneapolis, Minnesota. We're currently, it's been snowing because it's April. So, of course, it does that. But currently, it's just raining. So,
Nice. I feel like all my up north friends have talked about how it's been a little bit of a roller coaster of a season so far. A little bit warm, then a little bit cold.
every April.
Every April. Nice. And we also have Dave Amirault, Director of Marketing at Pagely. Before joining Pagely, Dave helped brand several large ski resorts and has a personal brand that is nothing if not witty and entertaining. How are you doing today, Dave?
I'm doing good, Marcus. It's 74 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake, and then it's going to snow 3 feet this weekend.
Wow, nice.
Oh, that's worse.
Short sleeves while I can, right? Because I
There you
am
go.
very pasty right now, thanks to a long rest.
Awesome. Yep. And I'm here. I'm Marcus. Like I said, I'm coming from Central Florida. I can't complain. Let's see. It's 77 and sunny right now. And I think it's going to just keep getting warmer from here. That's just how Central Florida is in April. So let's get into it. You've both been in charge of branding at some large companies, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. First, how would you describe what branding is, whether that's branding a company or personal branding? We'll start with Michelle.
Sure. So, branding is kind of a couple different things, in my opinion. One, it's kind of a company's idea of who they are. So, like, it's who a company thinks they are. And how they talk about themselves and how they position themselves and what their logo is and what their colors. That's kind of what we all think of when we think of branding. But also, and probably more importantly, it's what your customers think you are. And hopefully those are the same, right? But sometimes they're not. And so that's the stuff that some companies struggle with.
Nice. How about you, Dave?
I'm very glad that Michelle took that one first. Branding's a lot, right? For people that aren't in branding, they think it's what you look like, what you sound like, and everything else. But a lot goes into branding, right? It's a lot of research and development, and then like fine tuning of what that message and how it aligns with your products and your company's values and goals. And then personal branding can be all over the map, right? It's what you want people's perception of you to be, what kind of value and thing that you're known about, right? You nailed it. Like my Twitter feed is very tongue-in-cheek and witty, and people know me as kind of the tech ski industry guy. But there's a lot that goes into it from both sides, right?
Yeah, so it sounds like, just to kind of clarify a little bit, it's not just about the design, not just about what you look like, but it's also about sort of the way you represent yourself, the reputation that you're putting forth. How much of that is something that you control versus something that you sort of grow into and that your clients and customers sort of help shape and form too?
Well, I mean, to be philosophical, like you cannot control anything but yourself, right? So obviously, like if brand is about perception, you can't control that at all. But what you can do, at least what I do as an individual and what I encourage my clients to do, is like show up consistency and make all of your decisions and your language embody your values.
Nice.
Trying to figure out how I take that one.
Right?
I think a lot, so many people put the cart before the horse when it comes to the brand. Like they want to make the shiny logo and color palette and everything else. But in order to get to that point, there's so much like hard work that needs to be done to achieve that. So yeah, Michelle's right. And brand's a lot of work.
Yeah, I want to say, like, on that point, you know, like the whole like wanting to jump into the shiny logo thing. Like, one of the things that I learned as I moved from being a young designer to a less young designer is that, you know, when people ask you, you know, hey, can you design a logo for me? Usually the answer is probably going to be no for a while. Right? Because it's like, well, why, like, who are you? Like, do you, if you haven't done that work, like, please don't hire me. Like, go get a temporary logo from somewhere and then come back to me when you're ready to do the work.
Yeah, jump on Canva and make something quick while we
Right.
do some brand research, customer research, figure out like the brand goals, like what products you have. Like, there's so much, but they all want the shiny thing, right? Like, especially if people are inexperienced with brand, right? That, because to them, that's the brass ring that they kind of grab onto.
Yeah, it's a little, I would say, a little bit chicken and egg, right? I mean, you sort of want to have that logo so you can get out there and sort of feel out what's going to work, what's not going to work. But then you sort of also have to know that a little bit before you can kind of pour that into the bright, shiny thing. For me, I know the bright, shiny thing has always been the thing that sort of makes it feel official. And I'm sure that's why that's sort of the first thing that people reach out for is like, I have this idea. And the way to make this idea exist is to have some visual piece to attach to it. And that logo, that bright, shiny object is that first step, I think. Even though there are a lot of steps that really should come before that determine what that looks like and how you go about designing that.
I can give you a little backstory on Pagely. I mean, we
Yeah.
just did a complete rebranding exercise, right? It's the first
Right.
time we've really done it ever. And we went with an agency, and it was almost a year-long process. And previous to this, right, we designed everything internally, right? We didn't have anyone helping us develop our brand. It was what we saw it through, right? We saw it through our own eyes, right? And we wanted to see it through a customer perspective or a potential customer perspective. And we went through a pretty arduous process to kind of land where we did. And a lot of people internally were just show me the colors. What are we going to look like? What is it? And I'm like, well, the emotion of it means so much more than that, right? So we went through and found our audience motivators, our brand attributes, like the customer intent and drivers as to why people come to us, right? And then we developed like what we call like our Pagely standard, right? And it was our origin story, the idea why we exist, and then the belief why we continue to get out of bed every morning. And then after doing all that legwork, we came up with like how we want to outwardly like project ourselves to the world and also to our own employees. And then that spurred the entire creative process after that. And what I'm looking at on my second monitor is a 47-page brand guide. But the great thing is once you have that, then you can kind of distill your own flavor of Kool-Aid, what you want to make your employees drink and your customers to get hooked on.
Yeah, exactly. Because that kind of stuff steers, you know, not only like what the website looks like or what the images look like or whatever, but also like how does customer support talk to people, and like, you know, how do we, you know, how do we exist on Twitter, and like all that stuff. Like the whole voice is part of it.
Didn't really even have this on here. How was the experience of sort of letting go control there? Because I know that a lot of folks that are probably joining us run their own agencies. They have their own design processes and thinking about, you know, branding themselves, you know, making that decision between doing it yourself or having, you know, outside perspective looking in. The benefits, how is, like I said, how is the feeling of having to kind of let go of control a little bit?
Okay, for me, it wasn't scary because I've been through this before, right? But if you are found like we were a small company before we got acquired. You know, we were founder led, bootstrapped, and everything came through the eyes of our co-founder and CEO, right? So I joked with him that the first day I got hired a couple of years ago, I said, I'm firing my first employee. And then he's like, you just got here. Who is it? I'm like, it's you. We're firing you. You're no longer our graphic designer. You're no longer our head of branding, right? That is the role of marketing and why you hired me. So after, you know, a few months of kind of convincing and saying, look, I think we have a real opportunity here to reshape the future of the brand, and to like, we had our goals and aspirations as a company. In order to get there, I said, this is really an exercise we have to do in order to grow up and take that next jump as a company. So there were people internally, right, especially engineers and people that deal in such absolutes with code that really don't understand it, but you want to involve them in the entire process. So for our founder and CEO, it was a bit hard for him to let go of his baby, because he birthed this thing, right? He was in control of the brand. In many aspects, he was the brand, right? And we still valued like having that type of a personality, but the brand could not be about him. He's a part of it, but not the sole reason we get out of bed in the morning. So that was a little bit of a letting go process, right? But once we went through and explained the how, the why, how we're going to achieve this, it started to make a lot of sense, because everyone was really involved. Our customers were involved, our employees, customers that we lost in the past, right? So everyone felt like they were a part of this process, and it wasn't like they were letting go of a kite and it was just going to fly into the wind and then magically land somewhere. So it did take a little bit of convincing, but once the process started kicking off, everyone started getting a little bit more comfortable with it, because you can start to tease the milestones and the things that you're accomplishing in real time. Cool process, but yes, a bit hard to separate the two and pry it away.
That's really interesting, because we're talking about on this thing here about personal brand and company brand, and honestly, like, for people that grow up a company, from the first person or the first couple people that started up until a company that can exist without them, like transitioning from a brand of personality to a brand of an entity is probably like that's probably like a really big challenge for people to go through.
Yeah.
It's like go ahead, Marcus.
Yeah, no, I mean, you make a good point that those sort of coincide to begin with, right? If you're smaller, maybe you start something by yourself, that brand personality and personal brand are sort of one and the same, and at some point you have to decide where those diverge and what that looks like.
But it also lets you play different strengths to each character now, right? The brand attributes are over here and the personal attributes are here with that individual or team of individuals or employees, whatever it is. And there's certain things you can and can't do with a brand that you can do with a person or a personal brand or a personality or anything else. Mm-hmm. So it actually affords you more opportunities to do things, but it does kind of separate the two.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We kind of jumped right into this, but I want to get to know both of you a little bit better. Michelle, I know you were in charge of branding at Target. Tell us a bit about yourself and how you got to work with such a well-known brand.
Not in charge of branding at Target, but I did work. So yeah, that's wow. Okay. So what actually happened is, Target is headquartered here in Minneapolis. And so I got to work. I was in charge of like brand and visual growth of one of their internal products, which was kind of cool. It's a platform called Studio Connect, which is an invite-only. It's kind of like an invite-only social platform that Target designers use to connect with like actual customers. You kind of interact with it a lot like Instagram. So designers will post a lot of ideas and or ask questions, and then like all the customers will kind of reply. And it's very conversational. It's not like a survey. But what was cool about this like niche brand is, Target Corporate has a very big and very well-defined brand, and they have a voice that kind of actually is very well documented and kind of permeates everything. Everything is very Target, like, Target is Target. And this was like a very interesting sub-brand within that, because it needed to, use the Target voice, but it wasn't like branded as Target Red. In fact, it was very like white with a little bit of purple as the accent color, because it was supposed to feel like its own collaborative artistic space. So when I got brought on and I worked on it for almost 3 years, we were building out the app and the web platform from the original people who founded it as two people within the company, and it was their brand and their baby, and figuring out how to scale that up beyond them to whoever needed to run it and whatever department needed to use it. and how to take like their vision and their like tiny brand voice and like make it into this thing that still felt like its own safe space, but like was also able to like scale up into like kind of the broader target corporate culture. So that was really fun to work on, especially as a contractor, and I had a really fun team to work with, and it was neat. So
I'd imagine that the rules, the guidelines there, the guide rails are fairly rigid. How much flexibility did you have to kind of do what you wanted with it versus having to sort of stay within certain limits?
well, because it wasn't like the target corporate brand, we had some flexibility. But what we didn't, we had to follow the voice. So, like I said, you know, brand is more than a logo, right? Like we're not using Target Red, but like when you interact with it, the way people talk, the way we write our copy for all of our error messages, the way we write our onboarding messaging and how we take people through it, like that should still feel like Target. Even though we are literally not using any of the fonts or colors of Target, like you should still feel like it's Target. But visually, you know, we had some room to iterate on it and to kind of make it feel like its own special space. So yeah.
How does
Michelle, I'd
you,
imagine the brand guardrails at Target are not only high, but they're electrified.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, they are very well documented. Although it was actually really cool because the other thing, I worked on some internal tools there as well, and they were actually building and developing their internal corporate brand that hadn't been built yet. Like, so how do internal teams build products that talk to each other? Because each internal team, you know, internal products are who knows, right? Like everyone makes up their own thing, and they were building like a brand guide for the internal products while I was working there. And that was really fun because I got to be a little involved in that and have some opinions about it. So
that's very cool. Dave, Michelle talked a little bit about how like the copy and the error messages and all of that stuff are part of the brand as well. In your 47-page brand document that's on your second screen, how much of that strays away from design and colors and talks about tone for the company, voice, what sort of things work or don't work as far as what you can say publicly or not say publicly? I know Pagely, maybe the guardrails aren't quite as high over there based on what I've seen. But how much of the brand guide talks to more than just the design aspects, the visual design aspects?
We have a lot of that, right? So our brand guide's divided into logos, color, type, website, photography, blog, application, tone, voice, and then brand management. So in that entire thing, right, you go to something like you read the Pagely standard, which is the origin, the idea, and the belief, right? And then spurring from that, you have like the audience motivators and what we satisfy, right? What are the brand attributes that we have, and what are the audience motivators, why people come to us, right? They're looking for growth, support, peace of mind, and then we provide like the flexibility, service, expertise, and transparency. And in that, we also say, like, look, we're a very confident brand because the products that we do provide you people satisfy that peace of mind, that support, and that growth. And then we essentially come and say, look, we invented this category in this space in WordPress. So we not only have such a platform and a soapbox to stand on, we can be extremely confident in our communication to customers on Twitter, on, you know, whatever it is, like even a receipt, right? So we have the like examples of the type of tone we can take in like customer emails and all those like little like outputs, right? And then it all just kind of boils back to those things that I mentioned previously. So while we don't have like an extensive like 20-page like here's how to make a tweet, here's how to make a customer email, right? What you do is you start to look at the tone, like the tone map, and say, well, if you were to write that, how do you address people? Is it, hey, what's up? Or is it, hey customer, or hey, first name, last name, we're glad to have you, or hey, we just wanted to let you know, instead of like, this needs to become attention of the customer, right? We don't play that way. So we kind of look at the relationship that we have with people and then communicate with them the way that we think we should from what we provide them. But maybe I should make like more pages to this thing. But you know,
47 is not enough.
Yeah, 47 is not enough, but we do joke internally that we have something called the bus factor, right?
Mhm.
So if I got hit by a bus today, right, who can carry on with the brand? Same thing with Strebel or head of engineering, right? So we like to have things clearly defined so that if people transition out of roles or anything else happens, right, then the brand can live on and be extremely consistent. I heard Michelle say consistency earlier, and that is such an important component of branding, because if you're all over the map and changing stuff day to day, no one can figure you out.
Yeah, and actually that point is interesting, because I've heard, you know, some other people in the space talk about this, like the temptation to rebrand, and like when is that a good idea versus when is that actually a really terrible idea? You know, like, is it like, do you actually need to rebrand, or are you kind of throwing out all of the equity that you've built? Would it be better to iterate on it or to clarify some things, right? So,
or did you just get a new marketing director that wants to do it?
I want to do my own thing. I need a legacy.
That's so common, and I'm very guilty of that. Just kidding.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, like you said, you kind of, to some degree, throw out the equity that you've built when you're doing that. If you don't do it well and do it right, because it is possible to do, but also if you do it incorrectly or too often, I think you also break trust. I think people don't know where you're at, they don't know what to make of you, and I think that breeds some distrust. And then it's like, well, what else are they going to change, and how is it going to affect me, right? Changing your branding is one thing, but then, okay, does that go as deep as changing the product that you're giving me? Does it go as deep as changing the support that you've been giving me this whole time? You know, who came in and started changing things, and now how does that going to affect me in my business?
Marcus, when you do a rebrand, it should build on the brand equity that you have, right? Unless you're radically changing your product or service or approach to the market, then it should build on all the strengths and characteristics that you've had before. It should refine it and make it better and make it more approachable, and introduce either like a new iteration or a new tone or idea. It shouldn't just be like a cut and dry, like throw the baby out with the bathwater or changing everything, right? Unless you're completely changing the whole company, then you don't do that.
Yeah. Depending on what sure, if your reputation or brand is not quite working for you, then maybe that is an excuse to switch it up. But
yeah, like look at Xfinity. People hated Comcast, but do they hate Xfinity? Probably in time, yes.
I mean, I was gonna say actually GoDaddy kind of did that thing that you're talking
exactly.
about. Like they had stuff from their previous brand that they kind of were like, these aren't really our values anymore, and they really they decided to kind of really change how they were presenting themselves, because we're like, actually these are our new values and this is like much better. And I think they did a great job with it. So I'm not just saying that because I'm on your show.
No, I mean, yes, there were some questionable times long before Dave or I were anywhere near GoDaddy, and I think the values changed before the brand did, and it was sort of an outward expression of things that were already happening internally.
Yep.
So, Dave, let's talk about you. You started with some large ski resorts before making the move to web industry with Pagely. How does branding for hospitality prepare you for branding in the tech space?
How does it prepare you? Yeah, so I'll touch on the background a little bit. So I started marketing in the outdoor space when I was about 15 and a half, 16 years old. And that was during the infancy of the internet, when it was pretty much like splash pages and people were using Macromedia Dreamweaver and Shockwave and things like that. And I was one of the first interactive service managers in the ski industry. So no one really know what to do with me. Oh, look, Snowbird Marketing has joined the chat. That's fun. Yeah, it's a lot different because there's seasonality to it, right? So when you're building the brand of an outdoor asset, you have winter, spring, summer, fall. You have programming, which within all those seasons, typically you have hotel properties and restaurants and ski schools and 100 million lines of business that all want to be uniquely represented and put on equal footing with your master brand. So it's really important to kind of nail what the master brand approach is towards an asset, and then how or if you need sub brands that feed into it, right? So in some places that I've been, you've had 800-room hotels, or you've had exquisite fine dining experiences. And then you have to figure out a way to develop sub brands for that then feed up to your master brand, where you can clearly communicate the value proposition or experience that your regular customers are going to have. And then the wild thing is, if you have really broad approach to brands, your different products or experiences satisfy different socioeconomical like abilities within them. So if you're a skier, you might not have a net worth of $10 million, but we have a product for people that have a net worth of $10 million, which is a really bespoke, custom wine paired dinner. But then at the same time, you have kind of people that don't want that experience, just want chicken fingers and fries, right? So you kind of have to build two different ways to communicate that to broader audiences. Then you have to learn about segmentation and all the other wild things. The difference between tech is, right, we have much fewer products. There's no seasonality to it whatsoever. Our reach is anyone that wants to use the internet. There's a lot more people that are prospective tech customers than there are skiers. And also the companies are a lot larger, right, in scale. So especially coming to GoDaddy, right, we have got a 350, 400 person marketing team. The Pagely marketing team is 2 of us at this point. But now we're learning all the kind of finer sides of marketing for larger tech companies, which has been quite the experience, because in the ski industry, I think my largest team was 17 or 18 people. So a lot of outside support with agencies, and here we seem to have the firepower to do everything internally.
Yeah, you say there are fewer products to market, but to your example, I think there is, let's just go with hosting, for example, hosting that is at the bottom end, that's $100 or $1.50 a month, up to, like Pagely notoriously has higher end hosting with a higher end cost to go with it. So I think there is a little bit of needing to sort of brand for both of those ends of the spectrum. Do you think that that's possible? Do you think that that's easy to do? Or do you think that something like sub brands for those is really the only route that you can go to market two very different audiences under the same umbrella?
I think for something like Pagely versus GoDaddy, we satisfy such a different product fit and need in the market. We approach enterprise at Pagely, and we don't do that from the GoDaddy side of managed WordPress hosting. So even who we compete against for Pagely, which is the WordPress VIPs, and then you compare it down to GoDaddy, where it's a much broader sense and larger total addressable market of customers. So while we're all selling hosting, we're selling different specific needs for hosting, right? So SMBs are much different than enterprise. They're different than people that just need brochure or magazine sites. So I think, yes, it is one product, but also like you might think a lift ticket is one product, right? But a lift ticket can be single day, multi-day, children's, 4 of 5 day access, right? Gated access to partnership hotels, right? You think, well, it's just a single thing. No, there are a lot of specific needs and customer things you have to satisfy within that product mix. So it is complicated, but once you have your products and segmentation all set up, then you can start to attack your audiences and create the brands and the messaging and the pricing and everything around it.
Makes sense. All right, let's address a couple of the comments which are asking about growing their own brands. The next question I have for you is, you've both worked with some pretty large brands, but for folks coming to us today with boutique agencies or smaller web shops, what kinds of things can they do with more limited budgets to grow their brands? Michelle, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, I mean, the exercise is really the same, kind of regardless of what your size is, whether you're 1 or 10 or 100 or 1,000 or 10,000. It's just a matter of like the scope and how much you have to document it, right? But it's really sitting. I mean, the boring part. It's like every time I answer these kind of questions, I'm always like, well, honestly, it all comes down to why, right? And then how. But you sit down and you say, okay, like, how do I want people to perceive me? Like, what are the things about me that I want people to think of? What are the things about my company that I want people to think of? What are the things about my service that I want people to think of? Why do I want them to think that? Like, why are those things important to me, right? Like, is there a value that I have? Is there something like, if I want people to think that I'm reliable, right? Why do I want people to think that? Well, it's because I want to be trustworthy, right? Something like that. And really, like, again, we can't control what people think of us, but then if we can think about like, all right, well, if I want to be reliable, what does that mean in terms of my actions? What does that mean in terms of how I communicate? I mean, it probably means I have to be very proactive in my communication, very clearly communicate things so that people always know what's going to be happening and people know what to expect. And what happens is never different than what they expect. Even if something changes, they're going to feel like they expected that change, right? So if that's something that I value, then that is how I'm going to write about myself. It's how I'm going to talk about myself. It's how I'm going to show up. And that's, you know, me as an individual, but that's true for a company as well. I mean, pick any kind of, you know, if you want to be known as, you know, having good customer service, or if you want to be known as, you know, having a like a very unique product, or if you want to be known as, you know, being very competitively priced, you know, why do you want to be known as that thing? And then how do you show up that way? And then again, like the visual part of it is kind of the end, you know, result. Like the, you know, personal brand wise, again, like, well, I have one of those. Like, I got pink hair. I usually wear pink. Like, does that have anything to do with my values or how I show up? No. It's actually kind of very, very at the end there. It's my logo, right? But it's the thing that you remember me by, and then when you see it, you're like, oh, right, that's that like really awesome, cool, reliable, super talented, adorable person, you know, right? Whatever it is that I stand for. But you see that and it reminds you of all the other values, but it doesn't create the values. Like I can't dye my hair pink and then show up and expect people to believe stuff about me, right? And that's the same thing with creating a logo, with creating a visual brand system. Like you can't just like put that stuff together and then just show up and hope that people believe something about you. Okay, that's my long answer to that question.
That's a great answer.
It is what helps kick the door in, though.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's how people remember you. It's how they remember you, but they have to have something to remember.
Yeah, that's great. What do you think, Dave? Any tips that for maybe smaller on a budget, anything to add to what Michelle said there?
Yeah, I would say for people that are looking to do this that might not have the resourcing to go get a large agency, I think it's really important to be inquisitive and honest, and then learn from other brands. I mean, you can look at any style guide, and you can buy a million of them, right? And you can determine best practices when you get down to that route. But having an honest and open conversation about your products and services and kind of drivers for your business are going to help you create a more honest representation of that when you start to go to market with what that new identity or tone or look is. And there are so many resources online where you can see like Michelle, now the process is the same, no matter if you are a 2-person shop or Target, right? It's just the larger orgs, it might just take a little bit more, right? Because there's more meat on the bone for kind of getting to that point. But yeah, I would say definitely look at what other people have done, understand the process, and then figure out at the end of all this, what do you want to be known for, and how do you get to that point and achieve it?
Yeah, I really, that's actually when I work with clients on brand stuff, you know, not everybody can think abstractly. Like it's really hard to just sit down and be like, well, who am I? What do I want? Sometimes I have people look at other people, both people that are competitors of theirs and also people that have nothing to do with them whatsoever, and be like, hey, like when you're looking at this, like what do you like about this? And what do you dislike about it? Like, what do you think your competitor's doing really well? What do you think your competitor's not doing very well? What do you think these other people that aren't in your space but kind of embody something that you like, you know, what are they doing well and what aren't they doing very well? Sometimes having those visuals to look at or having like a real thing to look at can be a springboard to talk about, you know, your own ideas. So when we say like look at other brands, we're not saying like go copy other brands. Although I'm pretty sure every single designer has lived through that phase in your life where somebody said make it like Apple, right? Right. We've all just done that. But like, no, we're not saying copy other brands. We're saying, okay, well, if you like Apple, like what is it you like about Apple? Okay, you like that it's really clean and you like that it's really simple to navigate and you like that it's very image heavy. Like, okay, that's interesting. Like, what do you like about that? Let's start there. Let's take that, let's run that through our own values. Let's make that something that's ours.
Is there a formula to the perfect brand strategy, or is it, you've sort of talked a little bit about, figuring out the why and the how. Is the formula asking questions, or are there steps that could be followed for either one of you?
That's 2 parts why divided by 1/3 part how times, no, I don't.
I mean, it sounds like the steps are mostly questions, right? You've got to figure things out before you can answer them, and use that to sort of feed the rest of the branding process.
Well, Marcus, I think the formula is that there's no finish line on a brand, right? It's a constant process and evolution. Even if the look and feel might be something that you pause and revisit every few years. The brand isn't just something you take off of a shelf and blow it off and dust it and then just decide to change it, right? So I think brand health is a really important thing to be cognizant of, right? So have those conversations internally as to what's working, what's not working, where you feel there are opportunities and ways to evolve and grow. And then when you want to change a brand guide, or just realize that that's not set in stone. It's supposed to be a fluid document for how you're portrayed. So if there's something that you want to change, go through the steps again and change it.
Yeah. Honestly, probably the closest thing to a formula is something like the scientific method or agile methodology, where it builds into like you create something, you kind of put your proposal together of what you think this represents, you put it out there, you do the thing, you find out if it's working, and then you iterate on it next time, right? And then keep going and keep going. That's, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about is really just designing the experiment. But putting it out there into the world and seeing like, okay, well, did this thing that I do actually like resonate with people in the way that I thought it would? Yes or no? If yes, hooray, iterate on that. If no, what do we do differently? Back to the drawing board, or maybe modify this one thing. Yeah.
Yeah, Dave, you talked a little bit about just going through a rebrand with Pagely. How do you know when the right time is to think about rebranding or updating your brand? Obviously, you don't want to wait until it's too late, probably. So, how do you know when to do it before it's too late? Or is it just you get bored with it? That's how I've always approached rebranding for anything that I've done, is I get bored with it. And because I designed it, I probably get bored with it long before anybody else gets bored with it. And I just redesign it. But that might not be the way to go. Any advice on, is there a cadence to it, or is it a feeling?
Well, Marcus, it was for us, and for a lot of times I've done rebranding. You look at the marketplace, right? And you look at how the brands around you have evolved with either look and feel or their new products, and how they've kind of evolved around it, right? In Pagely's case, we had an amazing product. But when we looked at the entire like 30,000 foot view of our competitive landscape, it was very apparent to us that we had fallen behind with things like our website and our customer facing materials and everything else. And we felt that the brand wasn't indicative of the product or the experience that we were providing, right? So how do we make sure that we had a strong brand and a strong product? So that's how we came to approach it. Some companies, it's much different, but I would recommend looking at a competitive landscape. And just by looking through their websites or dog fooding their products, where you stand. And you can do competitive audits and all that, but you'll have that gut feeling when you know that your brand isn't quite up to snuff.
Yeah, we have a question in the chat from David Peterson. I'll throw out to you. Can you give us a high-level rundown on your branding efforts and using social media like Twitter, Instagram, etc.? How do either of you? We'll get into a little bit more closely to personal brands in just a moment, but from maybe company brand side, how do you advise people approach social media in terms of branding?
Well, there's an entire profession that's dedicated to, kind of social media management and outward communication. And I will never pretend to have as much expertise as one of those people. In fact, I'd rather work with one of those people who can talk more about execution. But the stuff that I've learned just from being around this a lot is obviously if you've established a voice and a tone, like that carries through your social media as well. If you've established values about yourself, that also carries through your social media. If you want people to think that you have good service or you're reliable or whatever, like how quickly do you get back to people? How much do you monitor your feed? Are you having conversations with people, or are you just putting stuff out there? Like, which one makes sense? For me, I am a conversational brand. There's a lot of corporations that are also conversational brands on Twitter and other social media, and that's like very successful for them. But that doesn't make sense for every single brand. So it really has to align with like who you are as a company and how you speak to people in general.
Yeah, Marcus, I think it's also identifying what platforms your brand should be involved with. So, like Pagely doesn't have a TikTok. Why would an
come on.
enterprise manage? I mean, no one wants to see Strebel or me or the engineering team dancing, apparently.
That's not true. I could guarantee people would watch that.
That's what the personal account is for.
well, I guess I got to turn it on after this. Yeah, it's like identify which platforms are the most relevant for your brand to participate in, right? And Michelle crushed it with like, what is the brand? What's the tone? What's the voice? And then also that visual identity and consistency that you've established with things like your website, your collateral, everything else needs to spill over into social media. And that's incredibly important, right? So that's how you differentiate, and people have that mental picture of what you are, and then what they read reinforces that visual identity. So be consistent. I love that Michelle said, hey, if you're a service or a reliability brand, you have to engage with people. So many people forget that social media is not a one-way street. It's two-way and it's conversational, especially if you're a service brand or have customers that need support or anything else, or you just want to build brand affinity and community. Community can be such a major part of brand building, but also for personal brand. Like your personal brand is your community. It's the people that recognize and trust you for a specific thing or subject knowledge or expertise or entertainment, whatever it is. So you really have to lean into that. That's not saying that as a personal brand, you need to have a personal brand guide. There is no Dave Amirault 47-page brand guide, right?
Yeah, not yet.
Do not tempt me with a good time. I love making brand guides. I will open up Illustrator right now and do one, and it will have Helvetica and it will be clean.
Yeah, so I understand the consistency from the brand out through the social media platforms. Depending on the nature of the platform, let's take something like Twitter, which is a bit more laid back. Do you feel like those social media platforms offer a place to sort of experiment with the brand a little bit too, to see what works, what doesn't work, what people react to and don't react to there before going all in with the rest of your brand?
Twitter's the ultimate A/B test, man. Twitter's wild, right? That like Twitter moves so incredibly fast, and you can still view it algorithmically and everything else, but it does give you the flexibility to try different things, whether it's a different content strategy, different tone, different voice. But at the end of the day, it should all still feel like it's part of the master brand, but it does give you that wiggle room to experiment and also to engage. So an experiment on Twitter might be you following specific hashtags that relate to your subject matter or product or experience or community, whatever it is. Then you can start to like dip a toe in the water and figure out kind of how the water flows over there. Or you can just scream at the top of your lungs. Twitter kind of lets you do any of them. And sometimes both of those strategies work on there, where on Instagram, that might not work for you. Or TikTok, I'm not the expert in TikTok, so I can't really tell you that.
Right. I mean, I think what's interesting about Twitter is that people use it a few different ways. Like some people use it like a news feed where they're trying to get information about stuff, and some people use it to kind of like have a lot of meme-filled conversations with their friends, right? And it's kind of all over the place in between those things. And so again, knowing who your company is, like which of those kinds of things fits who you are. I will say though, and this is like also a little bit of me cheating and reading the chat a little bit and bringing some of the questions in. when you are engaging on a conversational platform, so a platform where you don't just want to like vomit your voice out there and like hope people read it, I think that conversational platforms are less about talking about you and more about talking about them. It's kind of the old thing in sales where it's like, you know, nobody actually wants to buy a drill. They want to buy a hole in the wall, right? They want a hole in the wall. They don't care how they get it. And just so, but everyone's so obsessed with talking about how great their drill is. And it's like, well, I don't care. I just want a hole in the wall. Like, whatever. Does your drill do that? Don't have your messaging be all about your drill. You know, talk about people's holes in the wall, and that you get it and you get how much they want one, and like, hey, actually you also can offer a thing that makes holes in the wall, right? If you think about that when you're engaging with people conversationally, it feels like you're actually listening to them because you are.
I've never heard that term and I love it, and I'm stealing it like with both hands. It's perfect.
Yeah, I didn't invent it, so please steal it. It's great.
I've heard similar ones, but that one's amazing. Before we switch over and talk a little bit about personal brands, David asked a good question in the chat. How much crossover is there between the company brand and company culture? Are your company milestones worth talking about to your customers? So I guess, is there a divide between internal and external there, or should it be a bit more open than that when you're presenting your brand to your customers or potential customers?
I think your company culture is part of your brand, right? Because if your company culture is distilled down enough where it's like a value, right? At Pagely, we jokingly have, well, it's not joking, we have something called the 7 C's, right? And it's seven things that like consistency, caring, commitment, right? All those things. And we don't really need to beat that into people's heads, because, you know, if you join Pagely to work with us, those are the values that we have, and that's what our expectations are. And we make that extremely customer facing. Like, it's a page on our website. Like, it's part of the onboarding process for a customer. We explain that. So I think culture is part of your brand, and initiatives that you're doing internally to help foster that culture and nurture it deserve to be exposed in your brand, right? Whether that's environmentalism, because that can be a company tentpole. And I'm not saying you have to be Patagonia and make your entire brand about that. Or human rights, or whatever values that you stand up for as a company deserve to be part of the external brand and the messaging.
Yep. But I would say, to piggyback on that, it's not just talking about it to say, hey, here's how great we are, we have these values. It's saying, like, here's why these values like will benefit you, and how they show that we care about your experience.
Bingo.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I 100% agree. I think, especially if you're a company of more than one, that your internal culture will feed what the rest of your employees share about your brand and about working at the company that they work at, and all of that becomes part of the brand as well. Like I asked at the very top, right? How much of the brand is stuff that you put forth versus how much is others perceiving you a certain way? And if your culture leaks out and it matches the brand, then that's just going to continue to build that same brand rather than be in opposition to it. Let's see. Let's go ahead and switch over to talking about personal brands a little bit. Why would someone need to worry about their personal brand in the first place? Like, what benefits are there to building your personal brand, either instead of a company brand or in addition to a company brand? Whichever one of you wants to go first.
Sure. All right. Well, I mean, since personal brand is like a thing that apparently I've become known for, so here's the thing. You don't have a choice. You have one. You exist and people perceive you, and the way, you know, people see how you act, how you show up, what you wear, what you do. Like, you have a personal brand. That's what it is. You've already got it. The question is, you know, do you want to have it be accidental, or do you want to do it on purpose? Now, I don't think that everybody needs to go around trying to optimize, it's not a performance. It's not like you want to go like put on a mask that like you wear and like perform this character of yourself. Like we don't, I mean, that's easy to want to do, right? Because we want to try to show up as like our best possible selves and be like the aspirational version of who we are. So I'm not saying that we need to go that far. But what we do want to do is, as a personal exercise, like what are our values as a human, and do we want people to see us that way? What are our values as a professional? Do we want people to see us that way? And make our actions match those values. We can choose to have visual representations of that if we want to. We can choose to cater how we dress to match some of those values. Maybe if you want to be perceived as very laid back, your attire can match. If you want to be perceived as very professional or put together, how you dress can match that. What you do, how you speak, how you accessorize, all that stuff could match if one of those things is important to your values. I have a friend who basically every time he's in public, like he's always wearing a suit, like a really nice suit. He just like really is into that. And that's his brand. Like you just know, oh yeah, like that's sure when he wears a suit. Yep. Like I said, I did that with the pink hair thing. Some people do that by, always wearing like my partner, like he grew his brand, like he's always wearing like a flat cap. And like, that's just like in every picture and everything, like he's always wearing a flat cap and people know him by that. But you don't have to have a visual hook, right? You don't have to. It could be that you have a particular sense of humor. It could be that you are known as kind of like the person that someone can always call, right? So like, who are you and how do you want people to see you? And then like, do you want that to manifest itself physically in any way or not? Those are all choices.
You should also realize that a personal brand can open doors for you or slam them shut. And the platforms and the people you engage with, like it's usually public record on social media. So you have to like oftentimes be extremely careful about what you say or what you don't say, and realize that a lot of actions have consequences. But that and this is just how I feel as someone who is, I guess I have a personal brand, is honesty usually wins. So I liked the idea that you're not just putting on a mask every day and then peeling it off and putting it on like a weird stand at the end of the night and say, that's my personal brand and I'm going to put it on today because I'm going to a conference, right? Like putting on a hat is something you can do like for the visual representation of what you are, but the personality and everything should be true to who you are and your values and everything else, similar to a brand. So, if you're truly a jerk, your personal brand's probably going to be that you're truly a jerk. But if you're enthusiastic, excited, and engaging, and everything else, that will shine through. And don't feel that you have to have like specifically manufacture this outward persona of everything. I would say just be honest and be open and willing to communicate. And sometimes it's that you might be a subject matter in something, share your knowledge and do everything else. And that's just going to help bolster that relationship that you have with the communities that know you for a specific thing or brand. But now I want that brand guide. I really want to make it.
I was actually thinking about a point that you just made where like your personal brand both opens up doors and closes them. Don't think that closing doors is necessarily bad either. I mean, as a designer, like we advise our clients to really like know who their audience is. Like we aren't trying to speak to everyone and we aren't trying to appeal to everyone. We are trying to appeal to the people we're trying to appeal to. It's okay if your personal brand puts you in a niche. Like, I mean, multicolored hair is more acceptable than it used to be, but like there's probably some environments that it's not okay in. People that have like a lot of tattoos or people that are very irreverent, like again, it's a lot more mainstream. Like there's nothing wrong with it, but like actually it does kind of give you a niche appeal, which is probably great actually, because then that you're dealing with people that kind of share your values, right? So, having a personal brand that helps narrow down your audience in a way that's resonant to you and lets you sync up with people that value the things that you value, that's great. You don't want to, just like a company, you can't appeal to everyone. And I think you should try to really focus on appealing to the people that matter to you.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talked a little bit about the mask and pulling it off and that not being the best strategy. And how much you craft your personal brand versus it just is you. I feel like the company brands are so much more crafted, and I don't know if that lends itself sometimes to being a bit fake. Um, Based on knowing the Pagely brand, Dave and Josh, I would say that probably the company brand there at Pagely is a little bit more like the personal individual brands. Would you say that that's probably good advice for a company brand to just kind of base that brand and that on the folks that are working there rather than this really meticulously crafted thing that you have to, I don't know, for lack of a better word, keep up publicly?
Well, it is meticulously crafted. There's 47 pages of it.
Well,
But you have to remember, like we were such a personality brand to start, right? So if Pagely suddenly relaunched a brand and it felt completely different than everything that got us to that point, it would have been extremely confusing for our existing customer base or people that knew us within WordPress. So this new iteration of it still retains a lot of personality and that one-to-one communication and irreverence and confidence that we've had in the past. But now we're just starting to refine it and integrate it more into every other aspect of what makes the Pagely brand, right? So it's not that we can just do a hard pivot to being Target or WP Engine or GoDaddy or anything else. This was just very much like what were our strengths in being that one-to-one and personal and identifiable human-centric brand, and how do we carry that and evolve it into where we want to grow as a company and become, but still retain that DNA.
Yep.
yeah, it's a build off who you already are though, and not
Yeah.
let's figure out if we want to be an irreverent, confident company, even though we're not irreverent, confident people, and then have to try and play this charade of keeping that up all the time.
Right. I mean, I think even if you as a person or you as a company are not kind of like quirky, fun loving, like if that's not everyone's brand, right? Like if you're more serious, you're more reserved, or you can still like have a honest and brand and a brand that people trust by being consistent. I think most of the problems that happen with corporate communication and larger company communication is where you say one thing as who you are, and then when someone tries to actually interact with you or do anything, they get a totally different experience. Like, oh my goodness, like airlines all the time. It's like, yes, oh, we listen to you. We care about our customers. We do this thing. And then you try to actually interact with them and you're like, nope, I'm just a number and no one's listening and this is terrible. So I don't trust your voice because my experience is different, right? So it doesn't really matter what your brand is as long as, again, you're showing up that way everywhere.
Yeah, going back to personal brands, instructor Zam, I want to say,
Oh, I love this guy. He's the man.
Asked when building your personal brand, what feedback helps the most when trying to be right for your market. I feel like close friends and family aren't the best view from the outside. I guess the interesting part of the question to me there is, have either of you gotten feedback on your personal brands from anyone, and what is that like? Do you take it personally?
I've gotten a lot of feedback on my personal brand, Marcus. Right? It's either
It's a therapy session. How does that make you feel, Dave?
yeah, right. Like I feel like I should be laying down for this. Yeah, it's you will get a lot of feedback, right? And it's oftentimes from people that don't understand what you're trying to accomplish, or they just grew up in a different time, right? So I mean, I've probably made hundreds of thousands of tweets at this point, and hundreds of Instagram posts. I mean, my fingers should probably fall off from how much I use a smartphone. But some people don't understand the engagement tactics because they didn't grow up in eras where there were personal brands, or that an individual could have the same democratized reach as a brand these days. And that, because of how the technology platforms and communication has shifted, has created conversations like this where personal brands exist, because we do now have equal playing fields as everybody else. So other people say, I have no idea. Why are you on Twitter? Why are you doing that? I saw a tweet of yours was embedded in a news article I read on X, Y, or Z. Like, what the heck? And I'm like, well, that's how the internet works, and that's how subject matter works, and that's how expertise works, and community. And that person found me through this because they talked about skiing or technology or whatever. So, take the feedback, but realize that at the end of the day, you're the one that's going to have the gut feeling and the North Star for how you should be communicating and interacting with people and everything else, because it's value driven.
Yeah. I mean, you want to listen carefully to the feedback of the people that you're actually trying to talk to, right? And it's not necessarily just that people are going to be like, hey, I think of this of your personal brand. Like, probably not, actually. But what I do listen to is like, what is the language that my clients say when they're talking to me? Like, what kind of things do I hear from them? Do I hear like, oh, wow, that was easy. Oh, wow, I understand this. Oh, wow, like, you're great to work with. That was fast. Or do I hear like, I'm confused, I'm frustrated, like, this is taking forever? What am I hearing from my clients, right? Because again, that goes back to like, are my actions aligning with my values? When I'm putting stuff out there on social media or Twitter or whatever, Facebook, Instagram, like, are the people that are interacting with me like the ones that I'm talking to, right? Like, am I, mostly I'm talking to other people in my industry. Like, I'm not actually trying to get like client work off of social media. I'm trying to build network and community and help people and connect people. Like, that's my social media brand. Is that happening, right? Like, am I sharing stuff that resonates with people? Am I having conversations with people? Are we getting any kind of like aha, or I get it, or I feel seen moments on either side of that conversation? Because if so, my brand's doing its job. And if not, maybe I need to think differently about who I'm talking to or how I'm talking.
Are you fishing in the right pond?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Or like, yeah, am I in the right group at the party? Like, I don't know. Is this a fun conversation, or do I want to leave? Right. But I think, you can get feedback from a lot of people, but I think that what's that quote that's like, I think it's a Dr. Seuss quote where it's like, be who you are and say who you feel, say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter and those who matter don't mind. I love that quote. So maybe that.
That's a good one, and a good one for us to end with. I think since we are a bit over time, before I wrap us up, maybe both of you can tell us where people can find out more about your personal brands, your company brands, anything online. Where can people reach out and find you on the web? We'll start with you, Michelle.
Sure. I am Marktime Media, basically everywhere on the internet. I'm also really easy to Google. But my personal website is mynameismichelle.com, and you can find links to all my other entities there.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm easy to find. And once again, very Googleable, whether that's good or bad. You can find me on every platform at OZ Skier. And Pagely, once again, real easy. We're just Pagely on everything.
Nice.
Except TikTok.
Except TikTok for now.
Don't do it. Don't do
No,
it.
I'm not. It's a vortex. I'm not doing it. I've read the privacy policy and I hate it. No.
Awesome. Well, I will go ahead and wrap us up. To keep the conversation going here, we do have the GoDaddy Pro Community Forum. There's a link that Ken added to the chat there. And if anybody wants to hop over there and continue talking about personal and company brands, that is a great place to do it. Also, we have another meetup here, same time, same place next Wednesday. It's going to be a bit more developer focused and hosted by Courtney Robertson. Again, that's next Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern time. To register for that event, go to events.godaddy.com, and you can see any of our past events there or on our GoDaddy Pro YouTube channel. That's it for us. Thank you again, Michelle and David, for hanging out today.
Yep. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.